I'm writing my doctoral dissertation and also decided to participate in NaNoWriMo. I've been trying to write 50,000 words of a romance novel project in the month of November, and this week I have fallen way behind on my writing goals for my dissertation and for my creative project. I'm working on an outline of my final dissertation chapter, and I had wanted to have a finished version of that outline done by today. That no longer really seems feasible. And I had at one point had a 10,000 word lead in my NaNoWriMo progress, and now I'm down to like a 800 word lead. So I'm gonna spend the entire day writing today, and I'm setting myself two writing goals. My academic goal is to finish the outline of my fourth dissertation chapter. Even though I'm not feeling very confident about achieving that goal, it's still worth a try. And my creative writing goal is to write 1,500 words of my NaNoWriMo project. I'm required to write 1,300 words today in order to keep up momentum. So if I get 1,500, then I will have exceeded the website's expectation. So let's see if I can do it. On generating my own ideas and more on taking all the texts, literary and critical, that I know I'm going to be using in this piece of writing and taking some main ideas and synopses of those and organizing them into kind of a flow. So I know the order that my chapter is going to go in, and I have kind of a framework to work with when I then start really brainstorming my own interpretations and discussion. But for this chapter, I'm a little bit unsure of the direction that I want to go in. And so usually I just work kind of on my own, and then I send my advisor a completed first draft, more or less completed. It always has bullet points and notes to myself and to her about things that I'm not sure about. But I usually wait until I have about 30 pages of cohesive writing before I send it off to her for review. But since I'm uncertain about what exactly I want to do with this chapter, I have to send her an outline for this one, which means that the outline can't just be the jumbled mishmash of ideas that make sense in my head. It has to be something that somebody else can make sense of as well. So after that first little writing block I just did, I am realizing that I'm gonna have to do a lot more work to make it make sense for somebody else's eyes rather than just for mine. And that means that it's time to do some more research so I actually understand what I'm talking about. So my dissertation overall is about hospitality in early modern English literature, and each chapter focuses on a different facet of that. I have one chapter that is talking mostly about hospitality within the private domestic home, another one that focuses largely on elite hospitality contexts, and the chapter that I am working on right now is about hospitality as a way to kind of express ideas about borders and cross-cultural and international contact in early modern England. And a big part of that is kind of the ideas about race and otherness and cultural difference that are emerging in the early 1600s and more throughout the 17th century. And this is the topic that I know the least about of all of my chapters that I've written so far. I have done a lot of work with hospitality more generally, with domesticity, with different forms of drama, but these ideas of race and otherness and cultural difference are my shakiest ground so far. So a lot of the reading that I'm doing right now is just gathering information and teaching myself some of this. And then some of it is also just trying to get some more critical framing for the things that I already do know about, finding some more expert perspectives on this that can help me articulate the things that I'm already planning to write about. For example, I know that there was a lot of anti-cosmetic discourse in early modern England, and I know that that centered often on the stage because makeup was used on stage as a way to perform gender, for example, with white face paint and exaggerated blush and eye makeup on young boys, and that there was a fair amount of concern around how that kind of rewrote gender in a way that made some people uncomfortable and unhappy. One of the overall themes of this chapter that I'm working on, by the way, is how there's a lot of differences in discourse around things like performances of gender or cultural difference between the early modern English perspective and our contemporary perspective. But despite those differences, there are also some consistencies as well, as you can probably hear from my discussion of anti-cosmetic discourse and the idea of gender being unstable. And that same perspective about the performativity of gender on the early modern English stage also encapsulates some of the anxieties around the performance of race on the early modern English stage with regards to blackface performances, which were not extremely widespread, but there are quite a few examples of them. And so these are some things that I know, and I'm able to describe them to you, but as I'm sitting down to write this outline, I don't actually know how I know that. I've just absorbed this information over years of research and studying, and so now I have to go back into my archive of research and find the critical perspectives and historical documents that are going to let me demonstrate what I already know. So I was just doing some of that refreshing, going back in and reviewing my critical sources to get some more specifics fresh in my mind, and now that I've done that, it's time to go back to the writing stage, type up some of my notes and ideas into that outline. So my dissertation mostly looks at literature from between the years 1585 and 1642, which is kind of the height of English commercial theater from when it starts to become really popular in the 1580s towards when it is cut off in 1642 at the beginning of the English Civil War. And what I'm trying to figure out right now in my final chapter is if I want to go beyond 1642 at all and post-Civil War into the later 17th century. So right now I'm typing up some notes and outlined ideas about two later 17th century texts, which are two personal favorites of mine. A unfinished prose manuscript called The Unfortunate Florinda from the 1660s. And the other text is a prose work that is kind of considered to be one of the earlier English forms of the novel called Orinoco by Aphra Behn. So these are both female authored texts that are very interesting in the way that they deal with ideas of cultural contact and racial difference. Notably, both of them frame Europeans as the villains, and both frame African subjects as kind of the tragic heroes of the text. So I'm writing up some notes on those right now. I'm going back into previous writing that I've done on these texts, which I'm very grateful to have because it makes my work at this moment a little bit easier. And I'm trying to write a brief outline that gives an idea of how I would use these texts and then send it off to my advisor so she can tell me whether it's a good idea to go so late into the 17th century or whether I should stick to my original plan of focusing pre-Civil War. So we'll see how this goes. stepped away from my academic work for a little while, as you might be able to tell, because it's dark out now. It's 6:30, and I have an outline that's around 8 pages long. It has almost all the information I wanted my outline to have before sending it to my advisor. So I have the choice now to send it as it is in an imperfect state, to push for another 30 minutes or an hour and get it to that more correct state and send it off. Or there's door number 3, the door that I'm going to walk through, which is close down my academic documents for the night, call it a day in terms of that academic work, and move on to my creative work. I feel good about the day's work, even though I didn't quite meet that goal that I had set for myself in terms of academic writing. But now the academic writing day is done and the creative writing night can begin. So let's see if I can make it to that 1,500 word goal for my NaNoWriMo project. I did it. I had the goal to write 1,500 words. I wrote 1,600 words. It brought me to 33,000 overall in my creative project. I didn't quite meet my academic writing goal, but I met my creative writing goal, and that feels really good. I have a bottle of champagne in the fridge that I'm gonna open if I hit 50,000 words in the month of November. I guess I'm gonna open it at some point anyway, because it is in my fridge, but the goal is 50K by the end of November. I think I'm gonna make it. And this is what a super fun Friday night as a 29-year-old PhD student looks like.